Hello, this is JJ Humphrey. We are on Elephant in the Room where we discuss uh, everything that nobody else wants to discuss. Mainly, we look for things in Oklahoma. As always, I got Bobby Cleveland with me. But today we've got a special guest. We got David Ballard. And David is a private investigator who I've worked with on a bunch of stuff, mainly child abuse cases. And today that's what we're going to be talking about is all of the things going on in the court system and things that we've seen. What prompted me to want to talk about this was we saw this week, last week, that we had 3 children killed in a suicide. So the mother committed suicide, and the 3 children were killed. And I got a call from one of the children's fathers just a day later, I think, somewhere like that, and he advised me that the mother had actually attempted suicide before, and that the courts just in a month or two gave the kids back, or a short time, don't know the exact time, but gave the kids back. And again, this is not the first time she's had this problem. And so, months before this, she's got a gun in her mouth. One of her nephews had to take the gun away. She's threatening, telling her kids she's going to kill herself. They've got a good home to go to instead of this home, but the judge decided to take the children or that child away from the father and put it back in that home with the mother where all of this is going on. And so again, this is not a unusual story, is it, David? I mean, we're finding this all over the place.
No. Oh yeah, that's the common theme that's brought a lot of people together. Is we've got court systems where the evidence is being ignored, and especially when it comes to mental health. And well, like for one of the things we've talked about, if you have a problem or a situation that warrants child endangerment, you have to file an emergency hearing. That gives you 72 hours to be heard. Well, DHS and law enforcement, they're not going to have that report ready in 72 hours. So when you go into court and it's not ready and you can't call anybody, they rule against you, award attorney's fees to the other parent, and you may get hit with a motion to enforce or something like that, and they're sending them back. And they're also not allowing evidence that goes towards a history. They'll say, oh, that's too far back, and that's not true. That doesn't even match statute. But yeah, it's common. I mean, I don't know if y'all saw the Amber Alert yesterday that went out. A little kid, that guy went and murdered his wife. We actually had a run-in with that guy through one of the attorneys I worked with, and he fired him because the guy was so off balance. He'd go by different names all the time, and that where he got fired up, went and killed the mom, took the kid. Luckily, that kid's safe. But I mean, if you go look at the number of children that have been killed this year in Oklahoma, it's very sad and staggering that we're already that high and we're only halfway through the year. I think
is the system is the system of DHS, or is it the court system?
Well, a big part of it's DHS in this realm, just because. So we passed deals to increase the response time on a referral. The problem is it still requires that the call center establish if they believe it's a level 1 or level 2. That still gives them 72 hours to 7 days to just respond. The average time for a report to come out is 30 to 60 days. Well, if you're in a family court situation, you only have 72 hours. Otherwise, you're wrongfully withholding visitation, and they can rule against you. But if you call, and you have to subpoena in social workers, you bring them in, and if they're still waiting and they're going through it, they're like, we haven't found anything, they just do the allegations, then the judge can just decide. But doing some digging when we were prepping for the press conference a while back, that there is actually a timeline, but nobody follows it. They have to, if it involves a crime against a child, they're supposed to, within 72 hours, notify law enforcement. JJ and I looked at the cases. We reviewed over 100 cases where reports from everything from sexual abuse to mutilation of children, and law enforcement was never even contacted. Reports were never given to the DA.
And that's one of the things that we've looked into is that due to this Kelsey Briggs Act, they come in some new ways, and kudos to the state of Oklahoma wanting to try to fix the problem. But again, the fix has been just about the same. We're seeing the same results as what, in that case, we had a kid that kept being put back in the home, broken bones, beat up, abused. The father finally kills the kid, puts it in the freezer, made national attention, and
Yep.
wow,
And
my electricity went off or something.
Well, we've had trouble in the past with the DHS. I don't know, a few years ago, we got really bad, and supposedly they got all that corrected, but I guess they didn't.
well,
Now,
we've
go ahead.
Sorry. I was gonna say DHS, like the administrative office, they're making strides and attempts. The problem is they're so spanned out across 77 counties that if no one's educating the changes or what they can do, as a matter of fact, under the Kelsey Briggs Act, for law enforcement to get involved, it doesn't require that the crime happened in their county, and people aren't putting that out there. Under Kelsey Briggs, it can be the county where the child resides, the county where it took place, or the county where the original family case was filed. So we went to sheriffs and said, hey, you can file, there's a motion or a request for a Kelsey Briggs investigation by OSBI. It's just hard to get anyone to do it. And, the minute that a criminal act takes place, the social workers usually take a back seat. They relay it to law enforcement. It's just it's a breakdown in the way that it's responding to it. And I mean, a lot of it's because they're overwhelmed. I mean, I can't imagine how hard it is to fill slots for social workers net. But the other side of it is the education factor on it. Educating them on these updates. I don't know that anyone's doing continuing education for social workers that involve legal blocks to let them know what they can and cannot do and to help increase that. I mean, I can't say for sure on that, but it would definitely help.
Well, there's no doubt. One of the things that happened when Brown came in over the DHS, he closed all the offices and sent everybody to the house. And again, your wait times have just went crazy. So again, the first thing we ought to do with all of these agencies is say, hey, COVID's over, y'all come back to work. We should get offices where people who are not computer savvy or don't have access to a computer can come in and report these things and actually talk to a real person and have a meeting and not have to come back multiple times because a lot of these people live out in the countries. It's hard to get things done. I'll tell you another thing, David, you can speak to this, but one of the things I'm finding is McGirt is a nightmare on this because
it is.
I'll get somebody call in and then I'll call in DHS. They'll call me back and say, no, it falls under McGirt, so you need to call this tribe. Then you call that tribe, and they say, no, don't fall under McGirt. It's the states, and they just back and forth. I know one case that I had really good evidence, photographic evidence, video evidence, and to my knowledge, I talked to that lady not too long back, and nothing's been done on her 4-year-old, 5-year-old that really apparently. I mean, I've got some law enforcement background, and I'd almost bet you money that kid has been molested.
Yep, the McGirt swung a lot of problems in the beginning, and I mean, we already were sitting 18 to 24 months on the average turnaround time of a case getting filed, and that's something else too. Doing some research on statutes that, when it comes to children and domestic violence, it's not supposed to be that long of a period. But McGirt caused some issues, and then when they came down and said, okay, well, we're going to, affirm that, if the victim is not Native American and that it can be still tried in district, and they jumped out and started filing some cases, but it's still trailing. And, a lot of responses, we're just backed up and that. I mean, I don't know how familiar everybody is. I know JJ's familiar with the term forensic interview because I'm a forensic interviewer. And that's one of the steps with helping child victims. The average time right now on child victims on a forensic interview is anywhere from 3 weeks to a month. And that makes a really tough deal for interviewing a child because what are they retaining and also just trauma response, not trying to think about it. So it's timelines, McGirt, people saying understaffed. And then one of the recent developments that's been a problem is, so all state agencies use some sort of records management system, and going into what they call the digital file cabinet, daily reports and activity reports and investigation reports are not being filed in there like they're supposed to be. So when another worker or supervisor goes and looks at it, there's no reports to review to find out, hey, do we need to do something different?
Well,
So,
and again, trying to get a hold of those reports. I know as a legislator, quite often, oh, no, we can't give you this. No, we can't give you that. No, we can't give you that. So it makes it really difficult to find out, was this properly investigated? Are y'all really looking into it? And I'll tell you another thing, Dave, you may want to speak to this, but not one, I'm getting multiple calls. So a lot of times there's private groups, even church groups that are doing these forensic interviews, doing the psychological and counseling and interviews with the kids. And we're finding a lot of problems in those interviews. I had one where, hey, the whole tape got lost, or that they never even turned it on, and it was a high profile case. Bull crap. I mean, you're going to tell me it's just a coincidence that this district attorney's kid is accused, and now you can't find the tape, or you forgot to turn it on. Two other witnesses that I found pretty quick never called. We've got a case in Tulsa to where here's this person, psychologist, recommending to go back into the house to the father's house where the kid was molested, and there's nothing against the mom. Mom's fighting to get the kid back, but they're saying, no, put the child in dad's care who's already been confirmed to molest the kid. It's unbelievable. And we're seeing case after case after case like that. And even the guardian ad litem in that case, if I'm not mistaken, which again, for our listeners, guardian ad litem is a person hired by the court to make sure that this kid gets the best interest, that they get protected. And a lot of times these guardian ad litems are going along with these recommendations that seem insane. So how much of that are you seeing, Dave?
oh man, the guardian ad litem issue has been going for as long as I've been doing this. And the issue is people, I mean, when you hire people for things, you're going to go with people who tend to go the way you want to see it. A bunch of them, they're required to have 16 hours in the beginning of training and then yearly training on child abuse and domestic violence. They're testifying that they've never been through it or don't. And they're like, well, I've been an attorney this long, because they're attorneys. And guardian ad litem is governed by the Bar Association, the Guardian ad litem College. And we've got courts where they're overriding psychologists, doctors. I mean, we had a case that JJ's familiar with. We had 8 experts, because I'm a child abuse expert. We had 8 experts who never talked to each other, all came to the same conclusion about the abuse on this child. The judge blocked every one of us from testifying and took the word of a guardian ad litem who had been the GAL for the opposing counsel multiple times and seems to always agree with them. And they sent the child back with sent the child back to parents where the child was being forced to do things with stepdad that no child should be doing with any adult. And not to mention history of substantiated abuse cases by DHS. And the judge tossed all that out and let the guardian ad litem go on record. And there's a law in Oklahoma that blocks that the guardian ad litem can write a report to the judge and that, but they're not allowed to go in there and be the standalone deal. And that's how it's still being treated. And what's happening is they're siding with the attorneys that use them the most. And it's expensive too. When you get a guardian ad litem, I mean, it'll reach $7,000-$10,000 if you're paying for it. And even though it's supposed to be provided by the court, if the families can't afford it, well, that means they get to just appoint somebody and they go with the same person over and over. And there's some good guardian ad litems out there. There's a few in Oklahoma City that'll really know their stuff. But there's some that have no training, no background. They're just a GAL and they're required to have it, but nobody's checking it. No one's making sure they're following through. The only thing you can do is file a bar complaint and, hope for the best.
Yeah, that falls on deaf ears. But I'm not too impressed with bar complaints. They don't do a whole lot. So let's make sure our listeners understand why we're having this today. So a guardian ad litem is somebody that the court appoints to go into court, protect these children, and fight for these children's rights.
An attorney for the child.
Yes, and so we're seeing that a lot of times it's the same attorneys that get these cases. It's the same guardian ad litem that gets appointed. So it's the same people in case after case after case. And this turns into some big, big money because if they can get 100 or 200 cases a year at $7,000, $8,000 a pop, it's a pretty good gig. And what we're seeing is that some of these people, not all of the people, but several of these from multiple counties, seem to be making really bad uh, choices for their clients and pushing their clients back into homes where they're being abused. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah, some of them are coming in. They're advocating more for a parent than they are for the child. We've had cases, one out of Pot County, where the same GAL, it, he got one outed for committing perjury on the stand because he had never actually spoken to the child. He came in and testified all this stuff about the child, and the child wants this, and they kept asking, well, when did this interaction happen? Because they have to document everything, and it finally came out at another hearing. He never spoke to the child, never did a home visit on dad and stepmom, but said he did a home visit with the little girl at her mom and stepdad's house, and turns out he never went up there. He called on the phone and talked to the mom, and that was as far as it went. That he was in there making recommendations, and that ultimately led to a child being sent back into a home where she was being mentally, physically abused, and sexually assaulted.
So
what happened? Excuse me. What happened to that individual who made these claims?
The GAO.
Yeah.
Nothing.
So the guardian ad litem lied on stand, perjured himself, put this kid in harm, and keeps doing it. Probably get more cases.
He withdrew from the case, and then they allowed him to come back in the other day to try to speak his opinion because he'd been the previous JL. And the new attorneys for the little girl said absolutely not. He committed perjury and all that, but no one's going to, it requires someone to file it or go through. And that's honestly what it's going to take is a extreme accountability. See, people don't want to do the accountability with certain agencies or different groups because if they do, it's already hard to fill those slots is what the answer is. However, at what point do we go, I'd much rather have the best we can offer children and start combating these numbers rather than going, well, we just don't want to run the risk that people won't want to work for us. When the truth is, the whistleblowers and people we've interviewed, they left because they were being forced to do things they didn't want to do and say things they didn't want to say, and so they gave up. So they run out anybody who actually cares and tries to make a difference. I mean, that same case I'm talking about, they had a social worker, and if it hadn't been for her what she did for that child and pushed and got the medical people involved, that kid would have had zero chance, and they fired her for it. Said she went outside of her job purview.
Well, we just had a case Monday where we had a whistleblower come from DOC, and she got terminated for reporting rapes. And again, it amazes me. I'm not mad at AG. They did participate somewhat, but how do you have a whistleblower investigation and never talk to the whistleblower? You know what I'm saying? And now we're saying, oh, everything's all right. Court has found DOC fired her for absolutely no reason, manufactured the cause. They tried to do it again on even a more bullcrap case, and they lost again. So here's the court's ruled in her favor. She filed officially whistleblower. We found a lot of evidence to support her claims, and yet the AG said, oh, well, DOC did all right, and they never looked at the supporting witnesses that we provided. They never talked to the whistleblower. How do you do an investigation and never talk to nobody? It's just amazing to me that's and that's why this person you're talking about comes forward, gets fired. Well, who's going to want to come forward after that? So now you
Absolutely.
keep workers. So if we're going to do something, one of the first places we've got to fix this whistleblower and say, you go after whistleblowers, and we find that you actually attacked a whistleblower, we're going to put you in jail. And that's one of the keys, I think, whether it's DHS, DOC, or whoever. Well, Pottawatomie County is one of the biggest ones. Y'all found a lot of problems in Pottawatomie County, right?
Oh, yeah. 3 years worth of work, over 100 victims.
So has anybody went to jail on that yet?
Nope, not yet.
And y'all turned that over. Y'all turned that over to the proper authorities to show that there's been multiple in the court, in the judges, in these guardian ad litems, in the investigations, in the DA's office. I think the DA's office is involved in that, are they not?
The old DA's office, the new DA's office that was appointed after the DA was removed, it was suggested to be removed, and then the case was kicked to, it had to be recused and sent to Cleveland County for further investigation of criminal, and that was in February of this year, and there has been not a word, not movement, anything. The prosecutors who were in that case, the allegations were that the prosecutors were accepting money in exchange for not filing cases and favors and all kind of stuff. Matter of fact, just had new information on it that in one of the situations, the former prosecutor for Pot County accepted someone signing over property from a medical marijuana to him in exchange for not filing a rape on a 12-year-old girl.
And you found enough evidence to get him removed, but nobody's filed charges.
Nope, including, everything from sexual harassment to physical violence against employees, money going missing, taking money that was intended for child advocacy and putting it into other stuff and accounts nobody knew about in Lincoln County and other things. Every law enforcement officers who came forward were being threatened with charges and put under investigation. Anyone who tried to bring up an issue or anything was threatened with that. They were fired, and then they were threatened with charges. That's how we found out about it. I was out investigating child abuse cases, and law enforcement came forward to criminal defense attorneys I worked with, and were asking for help because they were being threatened with charges for coming forward.
So you've got all of this. Is it still under investigation? I mean, where is it at right now?
It got shifted. The Pot County had to recuse, clearly. I mean, that's understandable. And so there's a newspaper article and a News 9 story back in February where it was kicked to Cleveland County, and that's where it's been sitting.
So how many people, how big is the organization that's advocating to get something done?
Well, with our group, we have a bunch of attorneys involved, and then we got PIs and that. So actively, there's about 10 of us that stay at it all the time. And besides the help we get that's how I, met JJ and some of the senators, was I had to reach out to them. We met them at different deals, and they wanted to know what was going on because, and oddly enough, it started showing up in other counties. I mean, we're having similar issues in other counties. I mean, it's not isolated to one, but Pot County's been one of the worst. And I think they filed about 8 of the child abuse cases that were pending out there. And out there is where the worst of the worst stuff we've seen, from a child who was being assaulted by his father, forced back with a detective telling the judge, this is an open investigation. And the statute's clear. It says if abuse is suspected or even allegations like that, visitation will stop, and this judge does not care, overrides everybody. She's the one who would not let anybody testify or anything.
So who in the Capitol and representatives who are advocating for these changes to DHS?
I don't know, how we're supposed to say names or anything, but Senator Shane Jets.
I'll say him. Senator, you got it right there. Go ahead.
Senator Shane Jett's been awesome. Representative JJ Humphrey. The other day we had a press conference and John Talley was there. We've had out of Cleveland County, I just went to say his name, Rob Standridge. And then we've had Dana Preto from up by Tulsa. And I think Cindy Rowe's been advocating in the past, people like that have been interested in had cases of their constituents. I mean, Shane's he's opened his house to let victims come by and talk. I mean, him and his wife, all hours of the night to help us when we got involved out there. And we just didn't expect to take that many interviews. It took me almost 8 months to get through all the witness interviews, gather evidence, and a lot of people kept evidence too to help the case. But there's been some new developments out there too. They found some missing evidence from sexual assault cases, and now they're investigating a deputy who may have been assisting this DA by helping hide these SANE kits and things like that, so they were never tested.
JJ, who's helping in the house?
Do what?
JJ,
What's that?
who's helping in the house?
Well, the other day at the rally, me and Tally showed up. I think Tally's really interested in trying to do some things. The problem, Bob, is just like what we do with DOC. We put together massive amounts of how do you ignore this, and you got people going, well, you don't really have any proof. What do you do? Taking up for the agencies. It's not the agency's fault. We're shorthanded. We're this. We're that. And I agree. I mean, hey, I agree. DHS needs more help. We need, but the problem is, it's just like DOC. You're getting $500 million budget. Where is it going? How are you using it? And what are you using it for? So again, what we're seeing a lot of, and I will say DHS been working with me on this really, really well. I'm supposed to have a meeting set up to discuss what we can do on these things. But just like in that case that we started when we talked about the 3 kids that were put back in this home that were murdered by their mom and she committed suicide, held another lady to hostage. This had been done a few months before. How did these kids ever get back in the home? Where was DHS? Where was the guardian ad litem? I'm trying to get some information right now. Is it even the same gun? I'd be interested. Is it the same gun she used when she attacked, when she threatened to commit suicide? Is it the same gun that she used? How did that gun get back in the house? Why would you take a kid out of a house with a father who is working, who's not having any problems, and put that kid, 9 months old, back in this situation? Why would you do that? And we have this whole court system set up to make sure these things don't happen. What in the world is a judge thinking? What judge? I mean, hey, get off the bench. Where's the guardian ad litem? What crackhead was doing that? I mean, what crackhead would say, yeah, put these kids back in there? Where's DHS? I mean, this lady had multiple, not one. Why is the whole system failing, and why do we have kids like this killed? Now, if it's out of the blue and everybody's like, we never suspected, there was never a call, you can't catch every one of them. But when there's a history of abuse, when there's a history of this kind, putting them back in that house is just unbelievable. And I can't remember the name of the person that has a similar situation, same judge, same court situation. We've got a deal going on with Chico. You might want to speak to that, David. You know probably more on that. That's going on in Tulsa, where she's accused of kidnapping her own kids. These kids were put in an abusive place. She got them out. They're accusing her of stealing her own kids, and she's had to die. Yep. And the DA has been, you talk about some hinky stuff and being personally involved in his case. And then when you look at people who donated to his campaign, people he's close to, all these people are in this guardian ad litem, the ones testifying against. So again, you got this whole clique that seems to be against the mother when they know that the abuse occurred. I think it's been verified, hasn't it, Dave?
It is.
So you've got a known abuser, and who are they going after? Ain't going after the abuser. They're going after the mom who's trying to protect her kids.
Right. And threatened her with everything from charges to, which they're still going after, threatening to deport her and all this other stuff for protecting her kids. And I'm telling you, as a parent who's been through it, and that's part of the reason why I do this work is because I've been through it personally. Abused child, getting abused from the time she was 9 months old, adult handprints on her, mutilation, disfiguring her, and a judge going, well, that's just poor parenting. But with Chico, and she was threatened, basically, if you bucked up against us, and she was told that, you say anything to this, we can make it much worse. But, I mean, you can't fall out of last place, so she kept fighting. She's protecting her kids, so she's put herself on the line and then won some stuff against them because she just fought back. They're coming after her. Matter of fact, they just did the press conference up there, and the DA on it that they were calling for his resignation came back and said it's not proper for either side to try to prosecute people like in the public opinion, which is the only outlet you've got whenever you've gone to every person in the system. And like I said, big part of the problem is there's just not enough information exchanging hands of who can do what. The sheriff's office and that have a lot more ground, but if they go against just like anything else, we've met with sheriffs, some really outstanding deputies and sheriffs who have fought for kids and that, and then been put in the firing line against these state agencies. I mean, it's wild that people are trying to protect kids, and that's what Chico was doing, was what any parent would have done. You would have got your kid out of that situation and basically threw herself on the altar protecting her kids.
Well,
JJ, if the court's corrupt, where else are you going to go to?
Right.
Except the
what else
public.
do you have?
Well, you said you was talking about earlier when you first came on about working from home, and I know up there in your district, in your area, you and I can talk on the phone sometimes, and we'll be interrupted and disconnected time and time again, as well as the internet. And I'm sure that you're not the only one in southeastern Oklahoma that has this issue. So how's people going to work from home and do their job when they can't even be able to get on the internet?
Bob, I spend, and I know me and you talked about this before, but I pay for 2 separate internets so that if one broke down, like if I come to my office and that internet ain't working, and I do this all the time with you, Bob, I'm going to get off here. I'm going to run up the house. Give me 5 minutes. I'll be on this, and then there's been times both of them won't work, and my wife pays for having internet in her car, and quite often I've had to get in her car, hooked up to her internet, and then sometimes all of it doesn't work, and I had to use my phone, and there's been times we've just had to call it off. While we've been sitting here doing this interview, it's done kicked me off once. It just didn't take very long to get back on. But, Bob, I don't understand. Like you say, we can't even I'll be talking to you sitting at my house, sitting on my back porch. I'll go outside to talk to you, and it still drop us 4 or 5 times. And again, how can you say that you're going to be able to work from home? And who's going to work from home like they would at the office? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You're going to have your kids. You're going to have your dog. You're going to have Bonanza on, and you ain't seen that, Bonanza, so you'll want to watch it, or John Wayne's about to kill somebody. You know what I'm saying? You're going to have to stop and watch old John get business done. Bull, you're going to wash your dishes. You're going to clean your house. I mean, I get it. If I was them, I would say, oh, no, I'm working just as hard, and no, this is good. But the ones I talk to, well, I'm taking care of my so-and-so's kids, and I can't go back, Well, dadgum, we ain't paying you to take care. I'm glad that works out. But if you're taking care of them kids, you ain't working like you should be. You're not devoting your entire time like you would be if you were at the office.
How big do you think it is that people are working from home in southeastern Oklahoma? And they got to have a lot of people out there working for DHS.
Listen, I think this is a big issue. I think they're understaffed. I think they've always been understaffed. I think it's a huge issue. And again, I think there's a lot of people out there who want to do a good job, but I can tell you that if you talk to these child welfare workers, man, they get burned out pretty quick. I can tell you this, I was in business 28 years, and boy, the last call I ever wanted to have to go on is where we're taking kids, and I've had to be on a bunch of those where we call DHS. They got to come out there. They take the kids. I don't care if the kids are in a meth lab, kids are being abused. That's still their parents, and man, it's just a tough situation to sit there and listen to all that and have to deal with all that. They're in a bad situation. But again, we need them out there working. We need more of them. We need more. And we need them to be able to call all this stuff. And we need to be able to see the records. Dave's looked at a situation where every call that comes in is supposed to be reviewed by law enforcement. And
Yep.
I can't remember the numbers we looked at, but I mean, they've got a way of vetting those out. And again, I know I talked to them on some of that, and some of that makes sense, but it still seems like there are a large number of cases that how are you going to determine whether they're legit or not legit? You know what I mean? How are you going to determine, does this case need to go to law enforcement? Are we getting proper law enforcement to look at that? Of the 70-something thousand calls, I think it was, that come in, I think there was about 13,000. I'd have to go back and look at numbers, Dave. You may be.
What's the wait time?
Depends on what they classify. If it's a 1, they have to respond within 72 hours. If it's a level 2, they have 7 days. And the other thing is, well, one, for the workers, like knowing some workers, the computers that they use, the laptops that are so outdated and junky, they barely work half the time, because it's not even just working from home. When they go out in the field, they have their computer to put their stuff in. Well, they're having to go back by the house, get on better internet. If the computer will work, if it doesn't, just shut down and they lose all their progress. And then the other thing is, there's a trick that some shady people have figured out. If I call in a referral, let's say that, like I'm the abuser and I get outed. If I call in a referral first against the other parent or somebody else, and then they called in, they automatically veto that second one out because it gets screened out because they've already got a working referral, an open referral. So some people have done that, abusers, and then their referrals looked at. Well, if they go in and say, the other parent's not the abuser, not doing anything, and it gets unsubstantiated, which means that, that's the thing too, is understanding that substantiated means they found evidence. Unsubstantiated means that something's happened, but they can't prove it. And that's a big difference, because screened out means nothing has happened. And to be screened out, you got to be very thorough to know that. But sometimes when they're screened out and then they'll get in court and the lawyers representing some of these abusers will say, well, they had all these calls and they were all screened out. Well, yeah, no kidding. You're the one calling them in.
Well, what if I pick the phone up and call DHS to turn something in right now? How long of a wait time you have?
For you calling, you'll probably get a fast response, but you won't hear anything back unless you're personally involved. And we called in one a while back on a really nasty abuse case, and it was 7 to 8 days later, and the worker only interviewed, but then went and told the abuser what the child said. And because they couldn't file an emergency hearing, they were going to have to send the child back. And the child straight out said, I'm going to take it back what I said, because they're going to be left alone with this person. What do you think is going to happen when I go back over to the abuser's house and they know that I've turned them in? So the average time right now is 7 to 10 days.
Bob, I got involved in a case, been a little while back, but this is why when I started talking to Dave and all this is why I knew we had problems. That's why I want to get involved. So we got a case where a young man about 13 years old walked somewhere between 10 and 13 miles to town to go to DHS to report his parents for neglect because they weren't providing food for him and his 2 younger siblings. And the reason he did it was because he's watching his 2 younger siblings go hungry while his parents are doing dope and drinking. So he walks up there to turn this in, goes into DHS, and they tell him, we can't call for you. Here's the 800 number. And they write 1-800 number down. This kid ain't got a phone. This kid ain't got, how would he call them? 13-year-old kid, how would he know? And they're going to let him walk out. Give him a number, walk out. He went down the street to a guy he knew. The parents called the sheriff's department. They tell the sheriff, hey, this kid will be down here at this guy's house. Sheriff goes down there. This guy just about going to fight the sheriff. You're not taking this kid. Yeah, no, you're not taking this kid. And finally, sheriff's like, hey, what's going on? And the guy tells him, hey, these people are abusing these kids and everything. So the sheriff talks to the kid. The kid says, hey, DHS, I went to report it. I walked all the way up here to report this and gave him the number. And the sheriff couldn't believe it. Sheriff goes back down there to DHS. Oh, he's hot. He's like, did you actually do this? Did you give this kid and let him leave? Yep, that's what we're told to do. And so he got a supervisor involved, takes the kid down there, gets him some food. I laughed. He said he went to Sonic and bought him a hamburger meal and fries, and said, "You want another one?" He said, "Absolutely." Ate that, and then he said, "What about my sister and brother? I think it was siblings." And so I think they took them some food. And guess what? DHS put them right back in the home. Never missed a beat. What is going on? And what do you think is going to happen to them kids? What do you think they're going to say? It's just insane.
Last year I investigated a case where a 15-year-old boy went to a school counselor, told him what was going on. He had 5 siblings living in a 2-bedroom house, which sometimes that's not necessarily abuse because, hard times and that, but it was awful, the stuff that was going on in that house. And turns out that the parents were appointed to be like foster parents. It was someone within the family, and they were getting money on all these kids, so they were taking in all these kids. Well, he had siblings in that there. He tells the counselor because it was very horrible physical abuse. And even a coach came forward and said, yeah, I kept asking about the injuries that he had. And so they're like, okay, help's going to be on the way. Going to get it going. From the time the school counselor called in that referral on all these kids, 7 days later, DHS calls on the phone to ask the parents if they're adequately prepared providing for these kids. And they said, yep. And they said, well, we may do a home visit. They turn around and they beat this kid so bad. So this 15-year-old boy, 3 days later, commits suicide.
Well, if you're looking at the whole program in the big picture, what percentage-wise would be DHS's fault because of their misguided versus the DA?
After reviewing and seeing they're not turning over the DA reports or calling law enforcement, it just depends on. It's one of the hardest things to look at because there's a protocol in place, and we've had workers say after working there 10, 15, 19 years, they've never followed their own protocol. So it just depends if it actually gets turned out of the ones that are turned over. So the numbers right now for the state that we went through with JJ, just in 22, 18,000 calls were called in. Over half were screened out for being duplicate calls or whatever reason. Okay, fair. About a quarter of the cases that go to DHS, less than a quarter of them, actually made it to law enforcement or DA's office. And out of the 150 I reviewed in 22, out of 150, only 2 ever got to the point of going to the DA's office like they're supposed to. We've called DA's office and said, hey, DHS is involved. We want to see if the DA's report made it there. Well, they have a book that they checked, and none of them, they have to be signed off by the DA. And one of them involved the death of a 10-month-old baby. And that report was never turned over to the DA's office. So out of those, I think we figured out of just the cases I reviewed, about 125 were never turned over to law enforcement or to DA's office, and they included sexual assault and severe abuse. So the average is about a quarter.
I had a 6-month-old when I was a probation officer working. I was called in to fix somebody else's caseload, and I found a case where a 6-month-old baby had been raped, physically raped. Baby actually died and had to be resuscitated, saved their life. And guess what? They charged that individual for rape, but he was on probation for sexual crime as well, and nothing ever done. Nobody ever reported it. It's like I saw it, and it's like, and then I had a supervisor. You can't do it. You can't turn this in because it's going to make all of us look bad. I'm like, who cares whether we look bad? Who cares? And I turned it in behind the books. They wouldn't let me turn it in on ours. And so I just made a report and hand carried it over to the DA's office, which they then in turn filed a revocation and did the right thing. But it never showed on our records because they didn't want us showing how bad we'd done. They didn't want a record of how we hadn't done our job and how this fell through the cracks. And so that happens all the time.
Well, JJ, as you've always said, us looking for a reason. So what's the solution?
Oh, Bob, I think one of the solutions is to fix this whistleblower where employees can come forward and report without being in fear of their jobs and their career. Second thing, I think we have to create accountability, and there's things that we can do. One of the things that I'm looking at changing the entire criminal justice system. One of the things that I want to do in the new computer system. So I'm talking about putting a computer system that links all of this investigation, all of these things together. And what it would do, it's called a Brady system. And what it does, if you see a judge make one of these calls, if you see a guardian ad litem do one of these things that are pretty hinky, that looks bad, it flags them. Then if it comes up again, you see another flag, and you as the public can get on there and look at this. So it's accountability. And when they get so many flags, or if it's one flag can be heinous enough that it has to go in front of investigation.
So you're saying more transparency. You're saying more transparency.
Well, we got to get more transparency, and we've got, Bob, you just seen personally, we turned everything over to the AG. I'm not mad at the AG, but we accuse DOC of covering up. They go over and talk to DOC. No, we didn't cover it up. Here's our record show. Did they go and see whether so they come back and say, well, an admittance is not enough to file a crime. Well, you need to send that to the DA first. That's not your choice. So one, they're not following right, and the AGs would have to agree with that. Second, we found case after case where we found, and these are the cases in their own cases that they said wasn't enough. We found second corroboration, not second hand. We found a guy that had letters written from the inmate to the officer to the inmate confesses. That's what you call a slam dunk, even by their standard. I disagree. I think a confession will get you there. But if you have a confession in letters, if you have a confession and two other witnesses saying, okay, yeah, we heard this inmate bragging about getting tobacco and giving this guy oral sex. Guess what? That gets you there. So the question is, how can we find it sitting on our hiney at the Capitol and these investigators can't find it? And are they doing a good job? And then why would the AG agree with them? So we've got to find a way to get an outside independent group involved. The bar is a joke. The judicial complaints is a joke. They're a joke. The OSBI, I have seen tank cases. The AG, I am high on this AG, but I've seen the other AGs tank cases over and over again. The cases we're talking about, and again, we got cases going on at Tulsa, at Wagner. The Woolies. Look at what's going on with the Woolies and how much attention. And they've been put in jail twice, and both times it's kicked out because they ain't got enough evidence. How do you accuse people twice, no evidence, and they're still going to court? They're still fighting this battle. And again, things are coming out to make it look like there's some pretty wrongdoing. And again, when you start looking at all the attorneys involved in this, guess what? It's this one's wife. It's this one. They're tied in with this one. It seems like the same players over and over again. And
absolutely.
It is.
JJ, let me ask you a question here. I'm going to go back here on DOC. DOC is their whole hand right now is we agree with the AG. We're following with the AG. So they're putting it back because the AG said they didn't find anything, and they're okay. So this sounds like they're both working together. Their AG's working to cover up DOC.
Well, I've got to look, but I got from a probation pro officer said the AG put out on their Facebook that they agreed with DOC. Now, again, is that agreement before we had the hearing? Are they agreeing, or are they agreeing after the hearing? They said if we produced enough, well, how much you got to produce? I brought a guy over from Arkansas, said I got a letter. He admitted it. I know he admitted it. I had the letters. Did you file that? No. You got a guy that admitted. Seems like I think he admitted. And we got two witnesses saying they heard it. How much more do you need? I got a case where we have a child custody case. Did you go talk to the mother? Did you go talk to the mother-in-law? Who did you go talk to? Because I don't think that you did a really good job. And again, we got employee after employee who wants their name redacted, who want to be unknown. because guess what? They're scared to come forward. And if you got employees scared to come forward on the rate, these DHS workers scared to come forward, rightly so. You come forward, you get fired. And so again, that's what we're looking at. And if the AG agrees with that, shame on him. Shame on him, because we got to protect whistleblowers. And if you want to look classical whistleblower, we had it. And again, these cases that we're talking about, whether it be Chico, whether it be the Woolies, whether it be Mr. Jacob Williams, his case, and he can't even get the paperwork. You think, hey, if my kid got killed and I want to see police report, by damn, give me the police report. This Ringland deal, that you worked on, David. So we got kids in high school. Here's a superintendent, or not superintendent, a
Principal.
coach. Winning coach, principal. And guess what? This guy, not one school, two schools. This is his third school where this kind of stuff happened. And why? Because there's no record. Because let's whitewash it. Let's get him out of here so he can go somewhere else and do the same thing. Let's whitewash it, get him out of here so he can go somewhere else and do the same thing. Making kids get naked as discipline, run in place naked, do push-ups naked, do calisthenics naked. Again, is it because he's a pervert? Is it because he's just a deviant? What's the issue? It doesn't matter. He's something's bad wrong with that individual. But again, when you get him called, and the private investigator right there working on the case can talk more than I can on it, but you get him called, and guess what? Now the kids can't get their school records. Kids not allowed to graduate. One of the FFA teachers who were involved turned it in, gets fired. She goes out and tries to get more jobs. She's told, you know what, you should have kept your mouth shut. They owe her money, won't pay her. Again, this is what we're seeing, and it's just okay. It's just whitewashed and move down the road. We got to have people stand up.
Which is insane because, in a regular case, if a case is going, that would be witness tampering, and it's a felony, or it can be a felony. And so it's just crazy. The Ringland school deal, I mean, OSBI dropped over a 560-something page report to the DA's office back 2 months ago, and not a word since. And now that principal who was on leave is now back at the school. This school year coming up, you'll be back at the school. And like I said, and it goes beyond even the sexual, what would be considered lewd acts with a child in most cases, goes on to, I mean, everything from racial names, threatening kids physically. One of the other teachers, that was one of his own sons who works there, they had proof on Snapchat that he was hitting up high school girls with his shirt off, everything, telling them, I'll take care of you, I can make things happen. And we haven't heard anything from the DA's office, and they're still, I mean, those kids, luckily a bunch of the kids graduated, but all those boys that are left there all had to switch schools and get special letters to even be able to go to another school. And the superintendent knew about all of it and did nothing about it.
I was impressed the last rally. So this girl Chico that we're talking about, she has actually, started another group, which was the activist group I was at the other day. And, I think we had about, 60 people out there. They probably pretty close to that. And they're doing a lot of these social events and getting news media there. I think news media was on that one. But they're trying to bring attention. But what I was impressed, we had some of those high school kids that come up to that meeting because they firsthand seen what it's like and what nothing happens and what the court system, that's the deal. I think it's a two-tier deal. A while ago, you was asking who's more at fault. Bob, I don't know. David can talk more about that than I can. But, which one's more at fault? Right now, I'm leaning towards the court system being more at fault.
I agree.
But again, why is DHS on these cases not jumping up and raising hell and getting with groups like that we're trying to get with? Here's the deal. I'm taking care of prison stuff, corrections mainly. And then I've got all kinds of bills I'm working on. But when I look at these, I can't stay quiet. I cannot keep my mouth shut. I'm going to go out and start working on these too. And again, where's DHS on this?
Yep. Well, and DHS, from the whistleblowers we spoke to, See, there's a problem. There's an underlying problem. Is Oklahoma has consistently come in as one of the top 10 to top 5 worst states for child abuse, domestic violence, intimate partner homicide. I mean, we're ranking in number 1 now in the nation in human trafficking. And the problem is these workers, and including other people, are being forced to not turn things over to help fix the numbers. So that we're
and that's what I think of with DLC, because DLC's got high numbers. I think they're just getting rid of all these to keep that good look when it's based on a lie. And I say that it looks, from where I'm sitting, it doesn't look like they're properly investigating cases at all.
Well, you said human trafficking. No, since that new movie come out, is human trafficking in Oklahoma?
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the things our foundation does. We started out child abuse, domestic violence, donating our time. And keep in mind, we have defense attorneys who volunteer their time to represent victims that I knew from doing expert witness with them because they understood the law. And we have family attorneys as well. But it started with one gal that I found out was a human trafficking, helped her. And the one defense attorney, Nick Lee, he fought so hard and helped us, and we brought in former clients that had information and were able to help build a case that led to that guy being prosecuted. But yes, in Oklahoma right now, I mean, just in the Native American side, every 4 minutes, a Native American woman or girl is kidnapped and forced into human trafficking in the state of Oklahoma right now.
Is it mostly females?
Mostly females, predominantly kids at risk, like youth, teenagers, stuff like that are runaways or bad home life. And so when you look at the combination, they're ignored while they're being abused. They're ignored while they're being assaulted. They go out and they start running around trying to find things, self-medicating, doing whatever. And next thing you know, they're ended up in human trafficking. And we just intercepted a pipeline coming out of Texas that was given to us by members of organized, crime type of deal that were against child abuse and human trafficking, turned over hard drives and that we then turned over to law enforcement. Now, we've had a great response from Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics because they are over human trafficking. They will jump on it. But yes, in Oklahoma, in 3 years that we've been helping with human trafficking, we've helped rescue altogether, I don't know the exact number for each category, but between domestic violence, child abuse, and human trafficking, over 600 victims in 3 years. And that's just one small group. There's about 5 groups in Oklahoma operating, and every one of us stay hooked up and busy all the time. Because we have so much rural land, the McGirt thing. I mean, we've worked 2 casinos that, off site because it's tribal land and federal land, but they're doing their exchanges in vans with these kids or these girls, sometimes 2 to 3 times a week. And
why Native Americans? Why is that so high?
So there's been a big write-up about and going on for a while that because it's on tribal land, it falls under federal. Well, you have, BIA and that. Well, you have to get that information to them, and it's a very tight-lipped community, and they don't trust a lot of people in that. So things are happening, and then, if they're taking off federal land, well, now, it's where did they go? And because it's so rural and that it's not, readily accessible. I mean, up until when the McGirt deal happened, they started cross-deputizing county sheriffs to go on work with BIA. But it's been an ongoing problem because it's just like there's not enough resources, especially in that element. And
but Dave, on McGirt, what you got is in cases of human trafficking, rape, murder, it gets kicked over to the feds, and the feds never had enough people to work. So all these cases pour in. Feds don't have 100 people assigned to this area. Now they're working all these cases. They're bringing people from California and New York. They're staying 2 weeks. They start a case. They leave. Somebody else comes in on that case.
Yep.
They're trying to figure out what's done. By the time they figure it out, they leave. And so what you got, I had a case. Guy got 3 guys beat him to death in Clayton, from what I'm told. All 4 were Native American, and the feds ruled it mutual combat. Now, I 3 guys beating up 1 guy to death, mutual combat. That's horse crap. And you know what I'm saying? But that's what we're seeing is they've got overwhelmed cases. And so they're just taking the top, and all the rest is getting kicked out. And again, the Native American people are the ones hurt most by this kind of, again, the non-tribal are pissed off over a ticket. Who cares? What we're talking about, somebody get killed, somebody getting raped, somebody get kidnapped and put into child labor, sexual, work. And again, that's what we ought to be concerned about. And the Native Americans are on the losing end of that deal. And again,
absolutely,
I'd like to encourage them to be looking at that, working with the state on how to resolve those issues. Again, we all should be able to sit down at the table.
Several tribes have put together groups. I know some investigators who've been through forensic interview training, different things. They're trying to combat it because when it hit, I mean, they had nothing set up. And, people can go, there's a site on social media and they have a website called Missing and Endangered Indigenous People. Right. And the facts on there are staggering and overwhelming on how from sexual assault to everything or how many are just kicked aside.
We've actually passed some legislation to forward that and make it easier to get done. So we've actually addressed some of those issues, but it's a huge issue. But here's the deal. Guys, we are out of time. Yep. And what's amazing, it feels like we just got started because we could talk. David, I was going to talk to you about the Woolies. I was going to talk to you about this case that's going on with 3 kids dying. We got foster kids. I was going to talk to you about foster kids, and we've got a DHS worker that's kind of let us know that she was told to terminate parental rights when they shouldn't have been terminated. So the supervisor could
foster the
kid out or have that kid adopted to their friend. And that seems to have happened. And so we've got so many things that we can talk about, whether it's at Tulsa with the DA, what's going on there, Wagner, what's going on there, all of these cases all over. Again, we know counties, I'm being told now Logan County is got a lot of problems. And so it just kind of, I've got some cases down here. So we hadn't even hardly scratched the surface. We're just getting the tip of the iceberg talking right here. So we're going to have you come back on, do a little bit more preparation on what kind of numbers we're talking about. But again, Bob, to answer your question a while ago, I think we got to improve whistleblower. But I think that we ought to, as a state, look into having an agency or a branch of the OSBI or something that is just tasked with investigating these things on these agencies, on judges, on political people, those kind of things, and that set them up to where they can't be touched, where they can't be influenced. We're seeing it all over our nation, abuse of our criminal justice system. We need to set up something in Oklahoma that stops that fights against that. So that's what I would say is that we need to work on.
Absolutely. And just let me know, JJ, I'll be happy to come back. And because, again, the only way this is going to change is getting it out there, finding the rest of these victims, knowing they have a voice, knowing what they can file and show, and staying at it and educating the public and educating. Because sometimes even judges, they don't know that they can do that. There's just not enough getting pushed out there of what people can and can't do.
Well, I'll tell you another thing we could have you come back and talk on that we hadn't even touched today, and that is child support and these kids that these judges are putting back in these homes of parents who are taking care of business or giving visitation when they know these people are in danger. And I know cases where DHS come back and said, do not let this person have one day, one unsupervised visit. And the courts are going, we're going to ignore what DHS is saying. And I know that's happening in this case we're talking about. I think DHS did go in there and say, hey, this is not a good home.
Oh, yeah.
Them. But where's DHS? Why ain't DHS raising hell on that? And so we got to have that. You got anything you want to share before we get off here?
I'd just say, JJ, I appreciate you bringing this subject up. We got to get behind it and get the word out. And it's only thing that gets it is when you get the papers, the news reporters, they can make a difference on this. And they've got to
Absolutely.
get out and start doing a lot better job from what I can understand from this. Thank you.